Good morning. I'm Joe Fryer.
And I'm Savannah Sellers. Right now on Morning News Now. Turning up the heat, a new Washington Post report says Manhattan's district attorney has convened a grand jury expected to look at the investigation into former President Trump and his business. What this means for the probe moving forward as President Biden announces a summit with his Russian counterpart, Vladimir Putin. Holding out hope on the first anniversary of his death, the family of George Floyd made an emotional appeal for comprehensive police reform from the White House grounds.
If you can make federal laws to protect the bird, which is the bald eagle, you can make federal laws to protect people of color.
The family's private meeting with the president and vice president and the future of reform on Capitol Hill. On the rebound, the summer travel season kicks off in earnest in just a few days, and AAA is predicting a blockbuster holiday weekend as vaccinations skyrocket and COVID cases dip. What to expect if you're hitting the road, and a summer warning from researchers, an uptick in ticks. And they're back as you prepare to finally make your way back to the beach this season. Scientists say sharks are making their way back as well, with populations growing in both Atlantic and Pacific waters. Why the trend, though, experts say is a step in the right direction. That's kind of like a lot of animal news.
Some ticks and sharks.
I'm not thrilled
Just
about.
Stay inside.
I think they're both at the beach. The ticks, too. Yeah. So, but we'll get there.
We'll get there.
We'll get through it.
We begin, though, with signs the criminal investigation into former
President Trump has entered a new phase.
The Washington Post reports the Manhattan district attorney has convened a special grand jury. It will hear evidence and weigh potential charges against the former president, the Trump organization, and its top executives. Now, in its reporting, the Washington Post cited two people familiar with the development. The Post says that the grand jury panel will also hear evidence in other cases. The district attorney's office has not yet confirmed the report. NBCNews.com senior White House reporter Shannon Pettypiece joins us now. So, Shannon, first of all, what more can you tell us about this special grand jury?
Well, the Washington Post also reports that this grand jury is going to meet about 3 days a week for a period of 6 months. So this is a process that's going to go on for a while. And essentially, a reminder, when a grand jury is convened, that is when typically a prosecutor feels they are ready to start presenting evidence. They feel like they have amassed the evidence they need to build a case. And the grand jury will decide whether or not there is enough evidence to prosecute. Now, we do know that the district attorney has been investigating former President Trump and his organization for at least 2 years. And part of that investigation, based on what witnesses have said, is related to whether or not the former president inflated and deflated the value of his properties in order to get loans and in order to get lower rates on insurance. So we know that's one thing they're looking for. There could be a lot more. Back in February, the district attorney for the first time got access to former President Trump's tax records. I will say former prosecutors who've been talking to NBC News, though, caution this could be a very difficult case to prove, and we are probably months away from knowing whether or not the former president will actually be charged with anything.
Now, Shannon, Manhattan DA Cy Vance is a Democrat, the former president, of course, a Republican. How is former President Trump responding to these reports?
Yeah, he is responding to this the way he has responded to pretty much every other investigation over the past 5 years now. He called this a continuation of the witch hunt, equating it to the quote unquote Russia hoax. He said it is an affront to the 75 million people who voted for him. And I will say the Trump team is planning to get back out on the road with rallies. So that will certainly give the president another platform to lash out against investigators and to once again try and turn this investigation into what he will claim is a political investigation.
And Shannon, while we have you, let's talk about the current president. The White House announced that President Biden will be meeting with Russian President Putin in Geneva next month. What is the White House saying about the summit? What do they plan to focus on?
Well, they have said they hope this will be a way to stabilize relations with Russia. They see a lot of areas where the U.S. can work together with Russia, for example, on the environment, on climate change, on the Arctic, on denuclearization. Of course, there are a lot of tough issues they want to confront Russia about, particularly cyber hacking and Ukraine. This is also a risky meeting for the White House because it elevates Putin's profile on the world stage. It gives him a big platform. So the White House is also very aware of that, so trying to balance that dynamic as well. But certainly this will be a very high-profile meeting, not only for President Biden, but also for President Putin.
All right, Shannon, thank you so much.
For more on the Trump investigation, let's bring in NBC News legal analyst Danny Savalos. Danny, good morning. All right, so give us more context on what a grand jury can do. When do prosecutors decide to bring them in?
This kind of grand jury is convened, a special grand jury, when there's unusually complex issues or an investigation that needs to go on for a very long time. And that is exactly this kind of case. It sounds like it's a far-reaching, deep dive into the finances of a large company with a lot of different holdings and a lot of different moving parts. And if that sounds like I'm being circumspect, it's supposed to be, because grand juries are supposed to be secret to protect innocent people and those who come in and testify.
And Danny, so what are you expecting to happen next? Where does this go from here? When can we know something?
We'll know whenever the grand jury is finished, again, because they're so secret. Everybody is kept in the dark. Defense attorneys like me are not even allowed in the room normally. So this is something that prospective defendants may not even know that they are being investigated. In this case, of course, all the characters who may be involved are essentially known. And what we can guess at, based largely on Michael Cohen's testimony to Congress and his guilty plea, is that they're investigating whether or not, for example, this large corporation inflated its value when it wanted loans or deflated its value possibly when it wanted to reduce its tax burden. That's a pretty common kind of investigation and normally a pretty clumsy, easily catchable crime in the white collar context.
All right, Danny, thank you so much for your expertise here.
America has reached a new milestone in the fight against coronavirus. Half of the country's adults are now fully vaccinated, with more than 61% receiving at least one dose. Now, at this rate, the Biden administration is well on its way to reaching its goal, 70% of adults with one dose by the 4th of July.
This is a major milestone in our country's vaccination efforts. The number was 1% when we entered office January 20th.
Let's bring in NBC News Now correspondent Maura Barrett. So, Maura, these vaccination numbers obviously offer promising news, but the CDC says we're not out of the woods yet. Why is that?
That's because the people that are fully vaccinated right now, the portion that have been fully vaccinated, as one doctor described it, were the, quote, easy ones. These are people who sought out the vaccines and wanted to get it as soon as they could. The rest of the people that are going to need to be vaccinated might be more hesitant and not willing to take the vaccines. And so Dr. Walensky at the CDC White House briefing yesterday was talking about the need for people to get vaccinated while also talking about the progress that's been made.
Cases, hospitalizations, and deaths are all declining because of the millions of people who have stepped forward and done their part to protect their health and the health of their communities to move us out of this pandemic. If you are not vaccinated, our guidance has not changed for you. You remain at risk of infection. You still need to mask and take other precautions.
You heard that warning there, looking ahead to Memorial Day weekend for people who are unvaccinated. Remember last year, this was one of those summer holiday weekends where cases spiked after we saw that influx in travel. Dr. Walensky also adding that people who are unvaccinated should add to their list to do this weekend, calling it a gift of protection.
Yeah, good reminder of what we saw 1 year ago. Now, Maura, we're getting a better idea of how the vaccines are working. The CDC has released data on those breakthrough infections. Those are the people who test positive for COVID, even though they're fully vaccinated. What are we learning about those infections?
Joe, the CDC is emphasizing that these breakthrough cases are rare. Take a look at these numbers. Of the more than 130 million people that have been fully vaccinated, just a little more than 10,000 people have reported breakthrough infections. This is the idea that someone who tests positive after they have been fully vaccinated. But even so, roughly a quarter of these cases were asymptomatic. And so doctors are continuing to monitor these cases because they want to get a sense of how these variants would come into play when it comes to these vaccines. But it's important to note that none of these vaccines are fully 100% effective. So statistically, there are going to be some minor breakthrough cases.
And more questions are still swirling around the origins of COVID. The White House COVID team has now responded to that U.S. intelligence report that says workers at the Chinese lab in Wuhan got sick with COVID symptoms back in November of 2019. What are they saying about that?
So the White House is taking this extremely seriously because we still don't know the actual origin of COVID-19, whether it escaped from that Chinese research lab where those workers got sick, or if it was a natural occurrence. I want you to hear more from the White House briefing yesterday.
It is our position that we need to get to the bottom of this, and we need a completely transparent process from China. We need the WHO to assist in that matter. We don't feel like we have that now.
Many of us feel that it is more likely that this is a natural occurrence, as has happened with SARS-CoV-1, where it goes from an animal reservoir to a human. But we don't know 100% the answer to that.
Now, earlier this year, our team at NBC reported that U.S. intelligence agencies had not ruled out the possibility of a lab accident, but U.S. officials are saying that if the Chinese don't play ball and provide more access to records and interviews with people involved, that they might not ever get to the bottom of it. Joe.
All right, Maura Barrett, thank you so much.
Secretary Blinken is meeting with Egyptian President al-Sisi in Cairo for the second leg of his Middle East tour, wrapping up his visit of Israel and the occupied West Bank. Yesterday, Blinken vowed to rebuild ties with the Palestinians and pledged economic assistance. NBC News foreign correspondent Kelly Kobayea joins us now from Tel Aviv. Kelly, good morning. So tell us more about what the U.S. is promising for Palestinians.
Yeah, Savannah, essentially this is reintroducing Palestinians to diplomatic relations. They've basically been cut out of diplomatic ties, cut out of talks with the United States for nearly 4 years, all throughout the Trump administration. So Secretary Blinken said, as you mentioned, that the U.S. wants to renew and rebuild ties with the Palestinians. In doing that, he said that the U.S. would be pledging about $112 million additional dollars in total. And they break down like this: about $75 million in development and economic aid, $5.5 million in immediate disaster relief to the people of Gaza, $32 million to the UN Refugee Agency for Palestinians. And in addition to that, going back to that issue of diplomacy, the Secretary said that the U.S. would be reopening the consulate in Jerusalem that has been essentially closed since 2019. So a 180-degree shift from the policy of the Trump administration. Savannah?
And so, Kelly, as Secretary Blinken wraps up this leg of his visit, is there a sense that he achieved what he set out to do?
So the goal, he said, in embarking on this trip was to solidify the ceasefire, right? And he was asked, actually, yesterday during a brief press avail, he was asked by our Andrea Mitchell as to whether or not he got any concrete assurances from either side that they would refrain from actions that could provoke renewed violence. This is what he had to say.
Any steps that either side takes that either risk sparking violence or, over time, and ultimately undermine the prospect for returning to the pursuit of two states, we oppose. And that includes settlement activity. It includes demolitions. It includes evictions. It includes incitement to violence.
So no concrete assurances, at least none that the Secretary of State was willing to talk about with the press. But it's clear what the message from the United States is to both parties, to both Hamas, the Palestinian Authority, and, of course, to Israel. Savannah.
Yeah, so now let's look ahead. The next stop for Secretary Blinken is Egypt, a country that was critical in brokering the ceasefire between Israel and Hamas. What can we expect from his meeting with President al-Sisi?
Well, as you know, Egypt shares a land border with Gaza. Egypt has been part of a blockade along with Israel since 2007 on Gaza. That's when Hamas came into power. The point being to stop weapons from getting to Hamas. So Egypt is going to be critical in figuring out how to rebuild in Gaza without getting that money into the hands of Hamas militants. That's one of the things you could expect Secretary Blinken and President El-Sisi to talk about. They'll also likely talk about strengthening U.S.-Egyptian ties and the funding going into Gaza as well. Savannah, we should be hearing a joint statement from the two of them at some point today, as we have obviously in Ramallah yesterday and in Jerusalem.
All right, Kelly, we know that you will stay on that for us. Thank you so much.
The family of George Floyd marked the first anniversary of his death with a visit to the White House. President Biden welcomed the Floyd family to the Oval Office for a private meeting. The family also met with lawmakers as calls grow louder to pass new legislation inspired by Floyd. NBC News correspondent Gabe Gutierrez joins us now from Minneapolis. So, Gabe, where do things stand?
Hi, Joe. Good morning. Well, there are memorial events here in Minneapolis and in cities nationwide, but among activists, there is mounting frustration that the Senate hasn't been able to strike a deal on the reform bill that bears George Floyd's name.
Say his name.
George Floyd.
After George Floyd's young daughter, Gianna, led a chant outside the White House, calls are growing louder for Congress to pass federal policing reform.
If you can make federal laws to protect the bird, which is the bald eagle, you can make federal laws to protect people of color.
On the first anniversary of Floyd's murder, his family met with lawmakers on Capitol Hill and privately with President Biden and Vice President Harris.
I am in awe of their courage, their continuing courage.
The George Floyd Justice in Policing Act would ban chokeholds, eliminate no-knock warrants, and create a national registry of police misconduct. But it stalled in the Senate, partly because of Republican opposition to issues such as restricting qualified immunity, making it easier to sue police officers.
And he did let us know that he supports passing the bill, but he wants to make sure that it's the right bill and not a rush bill.
Since Floyd's death, more than 1,000 people in the U.S. have died following police encounters.
The death of George Floyd is just the beginning.
Tuesday's solemn remembrances in Minneapolis got off to a tense start when gunshots rang out near George Floyd Square. Police are investigating and say one person was treated at a hospital. But then, here and across the country, moments of silence, commemorating the 9 minutes and 29 seconds convicted former police officer Derek Chauvin knelt on Floyd's neck. The trauma of witnessing that still haunts Darnell Frazier, the teenager who recorded that now viral video. I'm a girl trying to heal from something I am reminded of every day, she says. If it weren't for my video, the world wouldn't have known the truth. A year later, that truth has now opened the door to the White House. This Marine holding it open for Floyd's 7-year-old daughter as she entered the West Wing and hugged the president.
Gabe, we know the signing didn't happen yesterday as the president initially hoped for, but does the president have a new timeline for when he hopes to sign a police reform bill?
Well, yes, Joe. Bipartisan negotiations are underway, and President Biden now says that he is hopeful that lawmakers will be able to reach an agreement sometime after Memorial Day. Joe.
All right, Gabe Gutierrez in Minneapolis. Gabe, thanks so much. Time for a check on your morning news now weather.
Which, of course, means Bill Cairns joins us now. Hi, Bill. Good morning.
Hey, good morning. Unfortunately, today's going to be a very active severe weather day. We're going to see two separate locations. One's going to have a good chance of tornadoes. The other one, just kind of a widespread of potpourri of severe weather. That includes hail, damaging wind, and maybe even isolated tornadoes. So first thing first, the worst weather in the country this morning was right around Texarkana. This line of thunderstorms just sat there. It was like a fire hose for hours overnight. So there's some significant flash flooding in southern Arkansas this morning. Those storms are now drifting down towards Shreveport. So let's talk about this afternoon and this evening. We have 58 million people included in our severe weather risk areas. We have two separate ones, one in the Northeast and one in the Central Plains. Let's head into the Northeast. So it's going to be a warm, humid day today, very summer-like temperatures in the 90s, near record highs in some cases. And then this afternoon, late in the day, those storms will form around Cleveland to Buffalo to Rochester, Syracuse to upstate New York and Vermont and New Hampshire. And then those storms will head down toward 95 corridors. This does include D.C., Baltimore, Philadelphia, Philadelphia, New York. The timing for those storms looks to be mostly about 6 p.m. to 9 p.m. So for any of your travel concerns or any airport concerns, that's when the worst of the storms are expected. Now let's go to the middle of the country. You see a bullseye like that. That's a moderate risk of severe storms. We do expect some tornadoes, maybe even a few significant tornadoes in areas of Nebraska and also in Kansas, maybe a few in areas of western Oklahoma too. So we'll keep an eye on that late this afternoon into this evening. So let's talk about the forecast for today. I mentioned how warm it is on the East Coast, 93 today in Washington, D.C., one of the warmer spots in the entire country, with the exception of the desert Southwest. And we'll also be watching some coolish type weather in the Northwest. I promised you yesterday the weekend forecast, so here we go. So Friday, it looks like a first time in a long time, not severe weather, just kind of a rainy day from the Ohio Valley heading late in the day into the mid-Atlantic. It's going to rain all Friday night and Saturday morning in areas of southern New England and the mid-Atlantic. During the day Saturday, kind of cloudy and cool from Boston to New York, kind of showery around D.C. to Richmond all the way through the Carolinas. Notice the middle of the country looks pretty good. And then on Sunday, we watch a new storm with some strong storms in the middle of the country heading into the plains. Kind of cloudy and damp on the East Coast, not the best kind of beach weather, temperature 60s and 70s. If there's one good beach day this weekend, it'll be the last one, on Memorial Day itself on Monday for the eastern seaboard. Mostly sunny temperatures warming up. So little potpourri of weather as we head into the holiday weekend, guys.
All right. Thank you, Bill. See you in a bit. Up next, an NBC News exclusive.
What some diplomats say the State Department is and isn't doing to help victims of the strange symptoms known as the Havana syndrome. That's next. NBC News has exclusively obtained a letter from American diplomats who are suffering from symptoms consistent with what some are calling the Havana syndrome. In the letter, which was sent to State Department leadership, the diplomats claim the U.S. government has denied employees and their family access to medical evaluations and treatment, rejected evidence of their injuries, and invalidated their experiences. The letter isn't signed specifically by State Department employees. It's signed by, quote, victims of hostile actions in Cuba and China. NBC News correspondent Josh Letterman joins us now to walk through this letter and his reporting. So, Josh, the State Department employees say they haven't been given the same consideration as military officials who are suffering from these peculiar symptoms. Remind us what happened to them and what they're now saying.
Well, Joe, ever since these incidents first started coming to light in late 2016, these U.S. diplomats, CIA officers, and other workers have largely been suffering in silence, unable to really fully publicly discuss what was occurring as the U.S. government was investigating these strange incidents that began in late 2016, in which diplomats, in some cases, heard strange sounds, experienced bizarre physical sensation like beams of energy, and then developed a range of symptoms like headache, nausea, trouble concentrating, and trouble with balance and memory, many of them later diagnosed with brain injuries. But now these diplomats say that after a fairly chaotic response during 4 years of the Trump administration, they had been anticipating that because President Joe Biden's administration was vowing to take another look at this and really get to the bottom of it, that things would improve. But now these diplomats and other U.S. government workers tell the State Department in a letter exclusively obtained by NBC News, after 4 years of challenge, we were hopeful the new administration would welcome a partnership with us to ensure those affected receive the care and treatment they need. Those workers going on to say, unfortunately, our experience thus far has fallen short of our expectations.
So, Josh, how is the State Department responding to this letter?
Well, the State Department told me late last night that they are aware of the letter. They are looking forward to discussing it with senior leadership. But they also say that there is no higher priority for them than the safety of our U.S. diplomats. They say Secretary of State Antony Blinken is getting regular updates as the U.S. continues to try to get to the bottom of this unsolved mystery, Joe.
And Josh, while we're on this topic, the New Yorker is reporting more instances of Havana syndrome outside of Cuba and China. Where else could this be happening, and how is the U.S. responding to that?
That's right, Joe. The New Yorker is saying that there have been more than 130 suspected cases worldwide now, including in places like Colombia, in Austria, in other parts of Asia, such as Uzbekistan, as well as right here in Washington, with a few reported suspected cases near the White House. Now, the Biden administration and the intelligence agencies say there is still no known source or cause, but as NBC News has reported, the U.S. intelligence government does consider Russia to be the likeliest suspect, and a study from the National Academies of Science last year determined that these diplomats and other workers were likely injured by some type of directed microwave energy. Joe?
All right, Josh Lederman, thank you for your reporting this morning. Appreciate it.
50% of the country's adults now fully vaccinated. AAA is predicting a big rebound in travel. But along with that, we're seeing a rise in dangerous passenger behavior on planes. NBC's Tom Costello joins us now from Reagan National Airport with more on that. And Tom, I got to say, some of these reports are just kind of unbelievable.
Yeah, it really is unbelievable. We had a flight attendant lose 2 teeth over the weekend. But first, let's give you the big picture here, because as you mentioned, we've got a lot of people surging back, not only on the highways, you probably notice they're pretty busy now, but also in airports and also on planes. And so if you are traveling this weekend, or for that matter, over the summer, highly unlikely you're going to have that middle seat next to you. Highly unlikely that's going to be open. From clogged highways to airline cattle calls, clear evidence America is on the rebound. A year ago, in the grip of COVID, the country's roads and airports were emptied out. I was here reporting from an empty airport. Take a look. It's a virtual ghost town. What a difference a year and multiple vaccines make. Kay and Dan Lackadoo flying home from L.A.
Well, our daughter lives here. We have only one grandson. And I will cry. We haven't seen him in 18 months. So we spent a week here, and it was such a blessing.
AAA predicts 37 million of us will travel this holiday weekend, up 60% from 2020. But you'll need to plan ahead. Rental cars are in short supply. As for the top road trip destinations, Las Vegas, Orlando, Myrtle Beach, Denver, and Nashville.
It's been fun to get back on the airplane, be able to travel.
But this morning, Homeland Security is weighing in on an alarming increase in what the FAA calls unruly and dangerous behavior in airports and on planes. As we reported Tuesday, 2,500 cases year to date. The FAA chief even retweeting links to our reports saying we have zero tolerance for bad behavior on airplanes. Just this past Sunday, a Southwest Airlines flight attendant lost 2 teeth, attacked by a passenger.
I'm appalled that the flying public attitudes and tones has degenerated enough that flight attendants would have to come home to their families with such extensive injuries.
60 TSA officers have also been attacked this year, very often over the federal mask mandate, still required in airports and on planes, since half the country is not yet vaccinated, including most young children.
For individuals who violate the law, especially when it jeopardizes so much that we have invested in on behalf of the American people, will bring the full force of the law to bear.
So interfering with the flight crew is a federal offense. We're talking jail time, fines of up to $35,000, and potentially banned for life by the airline. As for that flight attendant who was assaulted in San Diego, she lost 2 teeth, some other facial injuries. The suspect was arrested, a 28-year-old female passenger arrested by police in San Diego. Guys, back to you.
I mean, just so disturbing. What has to happen to somebody to lose 2 teeth? I mean, that's just ridiculous. Tom, thank you so much.
Researchers say they're seeing a huge increase in tick activity this year, with new species spreading into areas they've never been before. NBC News correspondent Kristen Dahlgren has more.
Hey, good morning, Joe and Savannah. Well, researchers say there's no longer really a tick season. It's all year round, and they say this could be one of the worst years that we've seen in quite some time.
On a recent expedition in coastal Connecticut, researcher Gudars Malai was amazed.
200 longhorn tick on myself. That is within 2 minutes.
The longhorn tick, first found in the U.S. in 2017. It's known to devastate livestock. Researchers are still investigating what it could pass to humans. He also found Gulf Coast ticks, common in the southeast, now spreading into New England. Other research shows black-legged ticks, similar to ones known to spread Lyme disease, are now prolific near Northern California beaches. Scientists calling this year the perfect storm. A mild winter and abundant rain, just as people are heading outside in droves. Doctors recommend wearing light-colored clothing, tucking pants into socks and spraying with repellent, changing clothes and showering ASAP, and always do a tick check on you and your children. Molai's lab has usually sent 3,000 ticks a year for testing. They've already gotten 2,200 in the first 5 months of 2021. Assigned ticks are out in force, and a warning more may be on the way.
Lyme disease diagnoses were actually down during the pandemic, but that's expected to surge as more people get in to see their doctors. That on top of new transmissions expected this year, guys.
Coming up, the world's biggest online retailer could be heading to court.
Yeah, we'll tell you why the D.C. Attorney General is putting Amazon in his crosshairs next.
Baseball's Joe West just broke the all-time record for most games umpired. West has worked 5,376 regular season games. The 68-year-old, also known as Cowboy Joe, made his MLB debut in 1976 at the age of 23 and plans to ride into the sunset, retiring at the end of the 2021 season. He was congratulated by Garth Brooks on a video message at last night's Chicago White Sox-St. Louis Cardinals game. The record, by the way, was formerly held by Hall of Famer Bill Clem, who held the title for 80 years.
Oh, my gosh.
Which is almost as long as Joe West has been umpiring.
Yeah.
I remember watching him as a kid.
Oh, my gosh. Wow. 80-year record. That's kind of cool.
Yeah, good for him.
Right. Yeah. Thanks, Joe.
All right, time now. Hi. Time now for our nifty new graphic and your weekly checkup.
Woohoo! We love this segment. NBC News medical contributor Dr. Natalie Azar joins us now to discuss the latest health headlines you may have missed. Good morning, Dr. Azar. All right, so usually this segment is all about news that doesn't touch COVID, but this one sort of touches it. And this is actually a study that you're involved with because you do it all. So a common drug used for autoimmune disease can affect how well the Pfizer vaccine works. Tell us more about what you and your colleagues found, and should we be concerned?
Yeah, good morning, guys. So we talk a lot about the fact that people can have a variable response to the vaccine based on their age or their sex or their underlying medical conditions and the medications that they take. And for our patient population, one of those medicines happens to be methotrexate, which is really an anchor drug for us. It's used most commonly, for example, in rheumatoid arthritis, psoriasis, and other diseases. And so we tested our patients' antibody responses to the Pfizer vaccine. And what we found was that a third fewer patients who were on methotrexate produced adequate antibodies. And they also had sort of a dampening of that other arm of the immune system called the T cell response. So the doctor's orders for us are this. If you are a patient with an inflammatory disease or an autoimmune disease and you're taking medications, please ask your rheumatologist or your doctor if you should hold your medicine either prior to or after the vaccination. Also, we talk about boosters. We don't have any formal recommendations yet, but it's very likely that some of our patients may actually be candidates for boosters before the general population. And I know a lot of people are very interested in checking their antibody titers after they get vaccinated. It's still really not recommended because we don't know exactly what level is really that correlate of immunity. So kind of like resist the urge to ask because we're probably going to say no, but we'll see where that goes in the future.
All right, here's another one, Dr. Azar, for people who spend their working day mostly seated, a lot of folks in the last year. A new study shows sitting less can help maintain weight loss. Does this mean we should all be investing in standing desks, or what's the takeaway here?
I know. So I'm going to answer the standing desk question because I know that's always the burning question. Unfortunately, spoiler alert, standing doesn't necessarily burn more calories than sitting. But I know it's interesting, right? Okay. But let's get to the study. So basically, this was a study that was looking at either people who were weight loss maintainers versus people who were obese and had a stable weight. And what they found was that individuals who spent 3 hours less sitting per day were able to maintain their weight loss as opposed to people who didn't. This also included, by the way, spending less than an hour, for example, gaming or doing other things, again, sedentary. And why is this important? Well, of course, because we know that prolonged sitting increases the risk of obesity as well as a whole host of other conditions. Doctor's orders, I want you to take breaks throughout the day. Even if you get up and do some jumping jacks while you're sitting, as you're sitting and doing your work, avoid the TV and computer games. And one of my friends did this. If you're working from home, take calls while you're walking. No one will know the difference and you'll spend less time sitting.
Yeah, that's a great idea. Also, I think I just heard a groan from everyone who spent a pretty penny on a standing desk and just heard you say you don't
there are other benefits to it. There are other benefits. It's
Those
okay.
things are expensive, though. It's
Enjoy your
kind
desk.
of crazy. All right, Dr. Azar, finally, I love this one. Researchers have found there's a very simple thing that helps kids in the hospital manage their pain. What is it?
Oh, my gosh, I know. So this study actually looked at whether or not reading versus telling a riddle could make a difference in terms of the emotional and the physiological well-being of children who are critically ill in the hospital. So they use riddles and storytelling, only about 30 minutes of each, and then they checked saliva levels of both oxytocin and cortisol. Oxytocin increases, that makes you feel better. Cortisol decreases, that reduces stress. And they found that positive results were twice as good for the storytelling group as opposed to the riddle group. So your doctor's orders are, if your child's at home, they don't need to be sick in the hospital. Read them stories. Maybe it would also reduce pandemic stress. And it doesn't just have to be parents. Everybody can share in this opportunity. Siblings, aunts, uncles, caretakers. Really nice take-home message for all of us.
Yeah, absolutely.
I love storytelling.
Yeah, and I love the point that it could just reduce stress now. And obviously kids are going through a lot, missing school and everything. Dr. Azar, thank you so much. Again, we love the segment. Always love having you. The Attorney General of Washington, D.C. is suing Amazon on antitrust grounds. He claims the company used its monopoly power to keep retailers on its platforms from selling products cheaper elsewhere. NBC News business reporter Leticia Miranda joins us now to walk us through the filing. Good morning. Thanks for being here. So let's start with what the D.C. Attorney General is alleging here. What is in this lawsuit?
Right. So the D.C. Attorney General is accusing Amazon of using what's called a fair pricing policy, that all third-party sellers who sell on Amazon, they make up 50%. Actually more than 50% of all sales on Amazon. They need to agree to this fair pricing policy in order to sell on the platform. But in order to do that, this policy requires them to say, I will not sell this product any cheaper on any other platform. I will only sell it as cheaply or as expensively as it is available on Amazon. So the Attorney General is saying that fair pricing policy, which third-party sellers are bound to in order to sell on the world's or the country's largest e-commerce website, is lifting up the prices across the website and also across other online retailers. So that's kind of the heart of the issue is sort of this contract and this dynamic between third-party sellers and Amazon.
And Leticia, so I'm wondering how Amazon's responded to the lawsuit, but also, I mean, the fact that the Attorney General from the nation's capital sues them and, I mean, the stock barely even moves. What does that say about this case, about the power of Amazon, how much investors believe in the company? Just kind of walk us through what's going on the Amazon side of things.
Yeah. So the fact that the shares haven't, well, Amazon says our third-party sellers set their price, which is true. But at the same time, they have this fair pricing policy. So third-party sellers are kind of stuck in this very kind of odd position where in order to sell on the site, they have to agree that they're not going to sell it any cheaper anywhere else to compete with Amazon. And the fact that the shares didn't budge, I think kind of attests to partially the confidence in the company, but also the way that antitrust laws are made here in the United States. And there has been some discussion about some challenges to the way that antitrust laws have been developed in that framework. Antitrust laws in its very simplest form say that, if a company is offering the cheapest price to consumers, then that's really what matters. It doesn't really matter if there's, if a company is using its monopoly to abuse consumers. And there's, of course, higher discussions than I would be able to have here around the theory around that. But that's part of it. And also Amazon has been challenged on this front before. Some of that litigation, at least here in the U.S., has kind of fizzled out and hasn't really developed into any kind of enforcement action yet. So I think that might be why, investors are kind of waiting and seeing what actually comes out of this lawsuit.
All right. Leticia, Miranda, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Let's take a look at what's making news around the world this morning.
Raf Sanchez joins us from London today. Hey, Raf, good morning.
Joe, Savannah, good morning. More calls for the Tokyo Olympics to be canceled, this time from one of the game's official media sponsors. The Asahi newspaper said the games should be called off because of COVID risks. This comes after a series of public opinion polls found a majority in Japan now opposed to the games going ahead. Belarus facing growing international criticism after it forced a civilian airliner to make an emergency landing so it could arrest a dissident journalist. Roman Protasevich and his girlfriend were both detained and have made what appear to be forced confession videos. Their families say they fear for their safety. And finally, and this is not for the squeamish, Australian farmers fear a so-called mouse plague could last for 2 years. For months now, farms in New South Wales have been overrun by millions and millions of mice, causing massive economic damage. Guys, the situation is so bad, Australia's Deputy Prime Minister says the only good mouse is a dead mouse.
Oh my God, what a way to end it.
My goodness.
2
we're just giving half our
years.
audience nightmares. So.
2 years, yeah, that is a true nightmare. That was disgusting. All right.
All right, thanks, Raph.
I agree with him, by the way.
Robo-servers, not mice, robo-servers coming to a restaurant near you.
We'll show you how restaurants are automating your food experience next. It's time for our CNBC Money Minute, the biggest financial headlines of the day and why they matter to you.
Christina Partsinevelos is back with us. Hey, Christina, good morning.
Good morning, guys. And that mouse story was really something. But let's talk about the most anticipated corporate boardroom fight in years as ExxonMobil holds its annual shareholders meeting today. A small hedge fund is taking on the oil giant. The hedge fund is urging investors to add its candidates to Exxon's board with the goal of reshaping where the company spends its money, namely on cleaner energy projects. So far, the hedge fund has got support from some of the nation's largest pension funds. Tesla is ditching radar and will rely solely on cameras for its semi-automated autopilot driving system for the Model 3 and the Model Y. The autopilot system currently consists of 8 cameras around the vehicles, along with a front-facing radar, which uses radio sensors to detect distance from objects. The move to get rid of radar comes amid growing scrutiny about the safety of what Tesla calls full self-driving features, and that's following a series of accidents. Sony's CEO says the company's film studio is not for sale, despite a wave of consolidation in the entertainment industry. That includes the recent merger of Discovery and Warner Media and Amazon's potential deal to buy MGM. Analysts say Sony Pictures could be worth $30 billion. Sony's film franchises include Spider-Man and Jumanji, and it has recently signed new distribution deals with Netflix and Disney. Let's hope we don't see more consolidation, because that could mean higher prices and less diversity for all of us.
Yeah, that's a good point. All right, Christina, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Mom and pop restaurants are starting a robot revolution, rolling out automated servers across the country to run plates from the kitchen to the table. NBC News correspondent Sam Brock joins us now from Miami to tell us about these robots. So, Sam, first of all, it's called Astro, which is a reference to the Jetsons, notably the dog, not Rosie the robot. So how will this robot work?
First of all, Joe, bravo, my friend. Bravo on the Jetsons reference. And I would say Astro is the name of the robot. It actually stands for Automated Service Tray Removal Organizer. But Astro sounds like a lot more fun. What this robot actually does is pretty cool. You always see servers, Joe, in Savannah, with all these plates stacked over their shoulder. They're walking around with trays. It's laborious work. It's difficult for them. What this robot is going to do, the Astros of the world, is take a little bit of the load off of them. You'll see from the video that they'll start in the kitchen. They take plates, organizers, managers, servers do, put them on top of Astro. Astro kind of finagles his way through the restaurant. It's basically, I'm told, like self-driving car technology inside of a restaurant. It will anticipate traffic flows, end up at the right table, which is pre-programmed. And then there's a message. Here's what you hear.
Enjoy. Please take your food. Enjoy.
I would also add that you will now hear occasionally, as soon as the technology is updated, whether or not you're gluten-free. The Astro robot will remind the server who's gluten-free. It'll speak more languages down the road. So basically, this is getting smarter. Artificial intelligence is getting more intelligent by the day.
So you'll get enjoy in all the languages, Sam. Now, I was we called it the food runner. I had that job sometimes when I waited tables back in the day. People might be wondering, what about job security? Could the robots put humans out of work?
There's 2 points I would make here. One is the whole reason you're seeing such a spike right now is staffing shortages across the country, specifically in restaurants, Joe. So this certainly helps. The owner, Carlos here of Sergio's, told me that he's really concerned about his employees getting burnt out. They say they're working 6 or 7 days a week, so many hours, like we said, laborious work. What this does is creates efficiencies in the system, not replace jobs. It turns out that servers are saving about 25 miles walked per work, just 3 of them here, because of the Astro technology. So that's really what they're trying to do, is take some of the load off. Joe, Savannah?
Wow, 25 miles. Very cool. All right, Sam Brock, thanks so much. Very interesting.
Thanks.
Thanks, guys.
The great white shark population is exploding.
We've got mouse plague, ticks, now sharks. All right, what that means for your upcoming beach trips. Next.
There's new evidence that the great white shark population is growing. But before you go all jaws in your head, listen to this. Scientists say this is actually a good thing. NBC News correspondent Carrie Sanders joins us now to explain. Carrie, convince me.
They're aggressive right now. Well, good morning, first of all, Savannah. We're about 6 miles off the coast of Jupiter, Florida, here in the Atlantic. And in this particular area, they recently saw a great white. Now, we're with Captain Ron, who's luring some of the sharks in here. You'll see them in a moment. We have seen a bull shark here. We've seen a sulky, a sandbar shark. And as they come in, just remember, we're not doing this to scare you. We're doing this to remind you that as you go to the beach, perhaps this weekend, that if you're near salt water, there is probably going to be a shark there. But at the same time, this area where we are, and we're waiting for the sharks to show up because they've been rather busy this morning. The area where we are, there we go, right over there. The area where we are is a place that people will come out in boats and actually jump in to go swimming with the sharks, like this one that we see coming here, right here. So people get in and swim with the sharks here every day. And in the process of doing that, they dispel the myth that if a shark sees a human in the water, they attack.
The great white shark, the ocean's apex predator, a species that had been in serious decline, but now hopeful signs the beginnings of a rebound. A study by Oregon State University and Stanford using shoreline cameras and drones identifying hundreds of great whites.
It's like fingerprints on a human. The shape of their fin, the marks on their face, their abdomen and their tail.
So we can actually get a count?
That's how they're getting the counts.
And the counts are going
up because of the protections.
In just 10 years, a remarkable 35% jump in the population of great whites off Northern California. Close to 300 spotted in the so-called Red Triangle, from Monterey Bay to Bodega Bay to the Farallon Islands. Getting the most credit for the turnaround, the landmark 1972 Marine Mammal Protection Act. In the Red Triangle, there's been a boom in mammals like sea lions and seals.
Do we see more great whites there because there's food, or is it there are more great whites?
There are more great whites because they've been protected for over 2 decades now, especially along the California coast.
In both the Pacific and Atlantic, it's increasingly common to see sharks, sometimes just inches from folks paddling surfboards.
It's amazing how many people contact us all the time saying, you know, it was so cool. I was out at this beach and I got footage of a shark swimming by. And, you know, 20 years ago, people would have been like, we got to alert people. This is a dangerous situation. And now people are actually excited to see that.
The so-called Jaws effect that once demonized sharks, slowly changing with a new generation.
Did you get scared as you got closer?
No, I felt like really relaxed and calm.
All right, so Carrie, I get what they're saying there, but for those of us who don't want to see sharks while we're in the water, what do we do?
Well, if you see a shark and you're in the water, of course, get out. Look, if you are fearful that you're perhaps doing something that's going to draw a shark towards you going to the beach this Memorial Day weekend, remember this. Sharks like to feed early in the morning, like about this hour, and in the evening as the sun is going down. So maybe don't go in the water at those hours. And if you're wearing jewelry, take it off before you go in, because the jewelry can kind of flash underwater, and it can look, let's take a look down here, it can look like actually the scales of a fish. There we go, look at it. Here's a couple right here. It can look like the scales of a fish, and that's what they're after. Look, scientists these days are not calling the shark attacks. Instead, they're calling them shark mistakes, because yes, a shark have, as we know, over the years, they've bitten surfers, they've bitten swimmers, but more often than not, after they take that bite, they take off because it's not what they're after. Of course, if you're the victim, it's horrible, but the likelihood of being in the water and getting struck by or hit by a shark is very remote.
Wow.
Are you going to go to the beach now, guys, this weekend?
Yeah,
Or you could just go to that water park that Carrie visited yesterday.
Yeah.
No sharks there.
Exactly. We'll stick to the pool
No sharks
for
there.
now. Shark mistake. That's interesting. All right, Carrie, thank you.
Hey, NBC News viewers, thanks for checking out our YouTube channel. Subscribe by clicking on that button down here, and click on any of the videos over here to watch the latest interviews, show highlights, and digital exclusives. Thanks for watching.